Have you ever heard of a pharaoh so strange, so out of place in time, that some believe he wasn't even human? A ruler who dared to erase Egypt's gods, ban the mighty Amun, and declared that only one god, the sun disk Aten, should be worshipped? Meet Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh. His appearance was bizarre, his religion blasphemous, and his legacy erased. But here's the strangest part. Some believe he was an alien being, a hybrid, or the chosen messenger of extraterrestrial forces. In today's episode, we uncover the shocking truth behind the pharaoh who defied the gods and possibly came from the stars. The man who shouldn't be pharaoh. In 1353 BCE, a mysterious man took the throne of Egypt. Let's dive deeper into the ancient biography of Pharaoh Akhenaten. The future Akhenaten was born Amenhotep, a younger son of Pharaoh Amenhotep III and his principal wife Tiye. Akhenaten had an elder brother, Crown Prince Thutmose, who was recognized as Amenhotep III's heir. Akhenaten also had 4 or 5 sisters, Sitamun, Henuteneb, Iset, Nebeta, and possibly Bekhetaten. Thutmose's early death, perhaps around Amenhotep III's 30th regnal year, meant that Akhenaten was next in line for Egypt's throne. Akhenaten was married to Nefertiti, his great royal wife. The exact timing of their marriage is unknown, but inscriptions from the pharaoh's building project suggest that they married either shortly before or after Akhenaten took the throne. For example, Egyptologist Dimitri Labouri suggests that the marriage took place in Akhenaten's 4th regnal year. A secondary wife of Akhenaten named Kia is also known from inscriptions. Some Egyptologists theorize that she gained her importance as the mother of Tutankhamun. William Murnane proposes that Kia is the colloquial name of the Mitanni princess Taduhipa, daughter of the Mitanni king Tushratta, who had married Amenhotep III before becoming the wife of Akhenaten. Akhenaten's other attested consorts are the daughter of the Enishasi ruler Shatia and another daughter of the Babylonian king Burnaburiash II. Children of the pharaoh Akhenaten could have had 7 or 8 children based on inscriptions. Egyptologists are fairly certain about his 6 daughters, who are well attested in contemporary depictions. Among his 6 daughters, Meritaten was born in regnal year 1 or 5, Mekhetaten in year 4 or 6, Ankhesenpaten, later queen of Tutankhamun, before year 5 or 8, Neferneferuaten Tasherit in year 8 or 9, Neferneferu in year 9 or 10, and Setepenra in year 10 or 11. Tutankhamun, born Tutankhaten, was most likely Akhenaten's son, with Nefertiti or another wife. There is less certainty around Akhenaten's relationship with Smenkhkare, Akhenaten's corregent or successor and husband to his daughter Meritaten. He could have been Akhenaten's eldest son with an unknown wife or Akhenaten's younger brother. Some historians, such as Edward Wenter and James Allen, have proposed that Akhenaten took some of his daughters as wives or sexual consorts to father a male heir. While this is debated, some historical parallels exist. Akhenaten's father, Amenhotep III, married his daughter Sitamun, while Rameses II married 2 or more of his daughters, even though their marriages might simply have been ceremonial. In Akhenaten's case, his oldest daughter Meritaten is recorded as great royal wife to Smenkhkare, but is also listed on a box from Tutankhamun's tomb alongside pharaohs Akhenaten and Neferneferuaten as great royal wife. Additionally, letters written to Akhenaten from foreign rulers make reference to Meritaten as mistress of the house. Egyptologists in the early 20th century also believed that Akhenaten could have fathered a child with his second oldest daughter Mekhetaten. Mekhetaten's death, at perhaps age 10 to 12, is recorded in the royal tombs at Akhetaten from around regnal years 13 or 14. Early Egyptologists attribute her death to childbirth because of the depiction of an infant in her tomb. Because no husband is known for Mekhetaten, the assumption had been that Akhenaten was the father. Aidan Dodson believes this to be unlikely, as no Egyptian tomb has been found that mentions or alludes to the cause of death of the tomb owner. Further, Jacobus van Dyck proposes that the child is a portrayal of Akhenaten's soul. Finally, various monuments, originally for Kia, were reinscribed for Akhenaten's daughters, Meritaten and Ankhesenpaten. The revised inscriptions list a Meritaten Tasheret, Jr., and an Ankhesenpaten Tasheret. Early life Egyptologists know very little about Akhenaten's life as Prince Amenhotep. Donald B. Redford dates his birth before his father Amenhotep III's 25th regnal year, circa 1363 to 1361 BC, based on the birth of Akhenaten's first daughter, who was likely born fairly early in his own reign. The only mention of his name, as the king's son Amenhotep, was found on a wine docket at Amenhotep III's Malkata Palace, where some historians suggested Akhenaten was born. Others contend that he was born at Memphis, where growing up he was influenced by the worship of the sun god Ra practiced at nearby Heliopolis. Researchers Redford and James K. Hoffmeyer state, however, that Ra's cult was so widespread and established throughout Egypt that Akhenaten could have been influenced by solar worship even if he did not grow up around Heliopolis. Succession of the throne by replacing his brother Thutmose. Some historians have tried to determine who was Akhenaten's tutor during his youth, and have proposed scribes Hekareshu or Merira II, the royal tutor Amenemhotep, or the vizier Aparel. The only person who we know for certain served the prince was Parennefer, whose tomb mentions this fact. Egyptologist Cyril Aldred suggests that Prince Amenhotep might have been a high priest of Ptah in Memphis, although no evidence supporting this had been found. It is known that Amenhotep's brother, Crown Prince Thutmose, served in this role before he died. If Amenhotep inherited all his brother's roles in preparation for his accession to the throne, he might have become a high priest in Thutmose's stead. Aldred proposes that Akhenaten's unusual artistic inclinations might have been formed during his time serving Ptah, the patron god of craftsmen, whose high priests were sometimes referred to as the greatest of the directors of craftsmanship. But what about his quite unusual appearance? While other royals were idealized in sculptures, Akhenaten was different. His statues show him with an elongated skull, narrow eyes, spindly arms, wide hips, and an oddly feminine torso. Was this just an artistic style, or was it a true depiction? Scholars have attributed this odd appearance, androgynous with wide hips, an elongated head, almond eyes, square jaw, and womanly breasts, to various causes. Early representations of the pharaoh depict a normal head and body, but after Akhenaten embraced the sun disk god, Aton, as the one and only deity, his gender in sculptures and carvings became more ambiguous. His changing appearance has led to speculation that the depictions were metaphorical, meant perhaps to portray Akhenaten as the father and mother of all humankind. Opposing explanations suggest that the changing images were realistic and reflect a genetic disorder. Braverman is firmly in this second camp. This is not just artistic license, says Braverman, Professor Emeritus of and Senior Research Scientist in Dermatology and co-author of a 2009 paper in the Annals of Internal Medicine that examined the issue. With colleagues from Maryland and Pennsylvania, he proposed that two familial disorders, aromatase excess syndrome and sagittal craniosynostosis syndrome, were the most likely candidates. A third possibility is a mutation in the gene for a class of enzymes that was responsible for both the cranial and endocrine abnormalities of members of Egypt's 18th dynasty. If Akhenaten passed down gene mutations that conferred his strange physical characteristics on his progeny, he did not pass on his most notable quality, belief in only one god. Despite the pharaoh's single-minded concept, the sun disk did not endure. After Akhenaten's death in 1336 BCE, the cult that he had established faded from prominence, and Egypt returned to the worship of the many gods and goddesses that had preceded Akhenaten. But still, Egyptologists debate if he was suffering from a genetic disorder like Marfan syndrome, or was there another reason his body looked inhuman? The revolution of the sun disk Akhenaten did something no other pharaoh dared to do. He destroyed Egypt's religion. He shut down the temples, banned the worship of Egypt's pantheon of gods, and created a monotheistic religion centered on one deity, Aton, the sun disk. He claimed Aton was the only true god, an invisible force of life that transcended form. A monotheism's will among hundreds of Egyptian gods, Akhenaten, came to the throne around 1349 BCE. He spent his early years as king engaged in fairly traditional building projects, including at the great Karnak temple, home of Amun, and in the gold-rich land of Kush, Nubia, to Egypt's south. Late in his third year of rule, however, he took the extraordinary step of celebrating a Jubilee festival, a ritual renewal of kingship usually held after 30 years on the throne. At Karnak, Akhenaten constructed a series of Jubilee buildings with talatat, small stone blocks, that became a signature of his reign. Initially, the king's building projects embraced a range of cults, including that of the Aten, shown at the time as a falcon-headed man. But the Karnak Jubilee buildings featured the Aten alone and represented in a new form. As the disk of the sun, its rays ending in hands reaching out to the royal family. One of the Karnak buildings was also decorated with striking, colossal statues of the king with heavily exaggerated and androgynous features, drawn-out face, broad hips, and distended belly. These statues set the king apart from the mortal world and highlighted his role as a divine provider of fertility and prosperity, like the Aten. Aten replaced the pharaohs. Another of the Karnak buildings showed the Aten not with Akhenaten, but with his queen Nefertiti and the royal daughters. The Aten cult afforded a special place to royal women, especially Nefertiti, who was linked with Akhenaten and the Aten in a divine triad. The three were assimilated with the divine figures in one of Egypt's most important creation myths, the birthing of the twins Shu and Tefnut from the androgynous creator god Atum. Royal women helped to legitimize the Aten cult. They stood in for goddesses in contexts where female divine power was needed, and so became semi-divine themselves. Akhenaten's promotion of the Aten cult soon intensified. He changed his name from Amenhotep to Akhenaten, one who is effective for the Aten, and redirected revenue from Egypt's temples into the Aten cult. Teams of workers were dispatched to chisel out the names and images of other gods from the walls of monuments. Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, the patron gods of Thebes, were especially targeted. This removal work was often sloppy and incomplete, but it must surely have been an affront to Egypt's religious institutions. Building new holy city Akhetaten. In the 5th year of his reign, Akhenaten announced plans to create a new cult arena entirely for the Aten. He chose a place halfway between Memphis, Cairo, and Thebes, Luxor, and named it Akhetaten, Horizon of the Aten. The site is known today as Amarna. Whether driven by religious fervor or a political desire to distance himself from the priesthood of Amun, Akhenaten's abandonment of Thebes was a remarkable step away from the status quo. Akhetaten grew quickly into a large, sprawling city on the east bank of the Nile River. Vast temples were dedicated to the Aten, left unroofed to be filled with light, thus eliminating the need for cult statues of the god. Offerings of bread, beer, cattle, fowl, wine, fruit, and incense were given to the sun god on open-air altars. As the sun moved east-west over the temples, Akhenaten traveled north-south through the city in a golden chariot as the Aten's representative on earth. Akhenaten's palaces and temples were decorated with scenes from the natural world, including birds, frolicking calves, and river plants, celebrating the life-giving aspects of the Aten. Reliefs, paintings, and statues of the royal family adorned cult buildings, less extreme in style than the early Karnak colossi, but often still fluid and exaggerated. Occasionally, the royal family was depicted kissing and embracing. Around the city's outskirts, Akhenaten built at least 4 sunshade of Re temples dedicated to royal women, where the king connected with the regenerative powers of the sun god. In a valley deep in the eastern cliffs, he created a new royal burial ground. Loyal officials were granted space in the cliff face for their own grand tombs. Hoping for an afterlife in the company of the sun god, they celebrated the cult of the Aton and the divine king through scenes and texts carved on the tomb walls. These included the famous hymns to the Aton, in which the Aton is presented as the creative power of light. The hymns stress that the Aton is the only god, encompassing concepts of beauty, love, and fatherhood. Akhenaten's new approach to religion manifested itself in other facets of Egyptian culture, most notably the artistic sphere. The first works commissioned by the king appeared in the traditional Theban style, employed by nearly every 18th dynasty pharaoh preceding him. However, as he implemented new religious ideas, royal art evolved to reflect the concepts of Atonism. The most striking changes are seen in the appearance of the royal family. Heads became larger than in the traditional style and were supported by elongated and slender necks. The royal family took on a more androgynous appearance that sometimes even obscured the difference between Akhenaten and Queen Nefertiti. Their faces were characterized by large lips, long noses and squinting eyes, and their bodies displayed narrow shoulders and waists, small and somewhat concave torsos, and large thighs, buttocks, and bellies. Monotheism was blasphemy. It shocked the priesthood. It terrified the elites. It erased 2,000 years of Egyptian spiritual tradition. But here's the twist. The way Akhenaten described Aten, an omnipresent, all-seeing power in the sky, was eerily similar to how modern UFO believers describe extraterrestrial intelligence. Coincidence? Or is there more to the story? We'll find out about in the upcoming minutes. The city from nowhere. In a bold move, Akhenaten built a brand new capital city, Akhetaten, now known as Amarna. He claimed the site was chosen by Aten himself, communicated to him through divine visions. Amarna, the city of Akhenaten. The 18th dynasty of ancient Egypt was full of intrigue. Some of the most famous pharaohs come from this period. Akhenaten is perhaps one of the most infamous. In a political power move, Akhenaten decided to move Egypt's capital to this tract of land and began the construction of a new city dedicated to Aten. Akhenaten named the city Akhetaten. In the modern day, we refer to it as Amarna. This city was a unique cultural landscape that was used only for a short time during Akhenaten's 17-year reign. Today, Amarna is the perfect snapshot of life during Akhenaten's time, an Egypt torn by the new ideas of an enforced monotheism. It is also one of the most complete examples of an ancient Egyptian city discovered by Egyptologists. Finding Amarna was first uncovered during an expedition by Napoleon in the 18th century. Although people still occupied the site, they were unaware of what it was. Throughout the 1800s, the tombs of Amarna were explored, while the Amarna letters were discovered in 1887. The letters shed new light on the city, Akhenaten's life, and the Egyptian state. Amarna was excavated several times in the 1900s. First in 1911 by the Deutsche Orient-Gesellschaft expeditions, then by an Egypt Exploration Society between 1921 to 1936, and in the 1960s by the Egyptian Antiquities Organization. Amarna came to the forefront again in 1977 when Barry Kemp began work at the site, leading to the production of Amarna project documents, the fruit of Kemp and his team's work at the site, which is still ongoing. The Amarna project was completely occupied only during Akhenaten's reign. Soon after his death, Amarna was abandoned. Still, the site is a blessing in disguise for archaeologists. Less of a blessing was the city's deconstruction, which took place several years later. likely at the hand of Horemheb, was the last pharaoh of the 18th dynasty of Egypt, who had many of the city's building blocks repurposed elsewhere. Amarna, workman's village. The workman's village was a small settlement separate from Amarna. Workers who toiled at building tombs lived here and remained even after the capital was moved back to Memphis. The workers of the village were nearly completely self-sufficient. Here, they kept animals, worshipped at their chapels, and buried their dead. Because of the continued habitation and the sheltered nature of the location, the workman's village is a snapshot of what life was like in a smaller ancient Egyptian settlement. Interestingly, more structures were found intact and more organic matter collected here than in any other location in Amarna. The north and south suburbs at Amarna. The north suburb and the south suburb were Amarna's residential areas. The suburbs were filled with large houses with personal farms built among smaller worker homes. There was no clear delineation between classes outside of the grandeur of the homes themselves. Personal wealth or status did not seem to play a part in the urban planning of these areas. In fact, there did not seem to be much urban planning at all. And compared to other cities of the New Kingdom, Amarna had a surprising lack of direction. In these areas, anyone could choose how and where to build their homes. This seemed to have been based on personal preference rather than a strict set of rules asserting that Amarna was different. Here, every person was a worker, and every home produced something of value. Even larger estates for the king's advisors had their own small farm areas. Amarna was very much a new city, unbound by tradition, which is also reflected in its lack of in-depth city planning. When the city was abandoned, many households left objects behind. These included daily items that were replaceable, too big to transport, and more. Unfortunately, many of these items were lost due to robbery, careless excavation, or more. The central city area, Amarna's central city, was home to two of Akhenaten's temples to Aton, as well as the state palace. Administration buildings and other necessary royal buildings were packed together here. Because of this, the central city might be the most important area of Amarna. The central city is the only state center archaeologists can properly examine, as the area remains almost exactly as it was back when it was active, if we do not account for the environmental damage caused during the span of 3,000 years. It was in this area that Amarna letters were discovered. These tablets record the correspondence between Akhenaten, Amenhotep III, and foreign powers across the ancient world, offering valuable perspectives on diplomacy during the Amarna age. The main city area. One of the most famous findings from the excavations at Amarna was the bust of Nefertiti. This singular artwork, found in the workshop of Thutmose, the royal sculptor, in 1912, is one of the most beautiful and intact pieces from the period. Indeed, it's one of the best representations of Egyptian art ever found. The House of Ranifer, a royal chariot officer, was also found in the main city area, where most of Akhenaten's advisors, priests, and high-ranking officials lived in this area. Years after the death of Akhenaten and Amarna's abandonment, Horemheb returned to take the city apart and erase the Amarna period from the record. Horemheb consistently used building material from Amarna's main city area in other construction projects. This means that we might never know how this part of the city actually looked like. Akhenaten's palaces and temples. Akhenaten's temples and palaces are some of the buildings we know the least about. The unique architecture and art of these places of luxury and worship are lost to time, looting, and the drive to strike Akhenaten from history. However, there are a few things we do know. The buildings would have certainly been a sight to behold. Many of the Aten temples, including the Great Aten Temple, are thought to have manipulated light from the sun to create dazzling, reverent displays. Akhenaten and his family lived in the North Palace, a large complex with areas for the members of the royal family. The complex also included homes for servants and certain officials, as well as outbuildings for baking, production, and other pursuits. While the palace was not as grand as others, e.g. the Great Palace of Amenhotep III, it is amazing how quickly it was built following the city's founding. Amarna, Akhenaten's city. Amarna was abandoned shortly after Akhenaten's death. His successor Tutankhaten changed his name to Tutankhamun, revived polytheism, and re-established the capital at Memphis. Amarna is a great example of what people bound together by belief can do. The city sprang up quickly, and each resident produced goods to help the community thrive. Because of Akhenaten's heretical reform, or perhaps despite it, Amarna lives on. Restoration efforts are ongoing to rebuild the great temple of Aton, while work continues elsewhere on the site. Though Akhenaton's successors tried to remove his name and identity from history, the pharaoh's memory is still very much alive, especially at Amarna. As we can see, in a matter of years, a full metropolis rose from the desert, temples with no roofs, open to the sky, streets aligned with the sun, buildings adorned with imagery of sun rays extending hands to bless the royal family. Was Akhenaten building a landing site for celestial beings? Some ancient astronaut theorists think so. In the ruins of Amarna, archaeologists found no remains of traditional Egyptian gods, only the sun disk, over and over again. Why would a pharaoh go this far, unless he was under the direct influence of something not from this earth? The mysterious death and disappearance. Akhenaten ruled for 17 years. Then he vanished. Tomb W525. The tomb W525 was discovered in 1817 by Giovanni Battista Belzoni, an adventurer and traveler. He went to Egypt at the beginning of the 19th century and cleaned the sands out of many ancient places. Belzoni supposed that this tomb belonged to the Third Intermediate Period. He may have discovered a burial of people from this period inside. The description of the burial depicted coffins characteristic to the times of the 21st to 26th dynasties. Many decades after its discovery, Otto Schaden's team cleared the tomb and identified it as possibly the tomb of Akhenaten. According to the results of their work, it was prepared for a monarch who reigned between Amenhotep III and I. It was created with a plan characteristic to the 18th dynasty. However, in this place, it's hard to find evidence related to Akhenaten. Only an analysis and dating of the tomb allows one to suggest that it was made for Akhenaten. The mystery of KV55. The completely damaged tomb, KV55, was discovered on January 3, 1907 by Edward Russell Aaron, an excavator from Theodore Davis's team. It is located a few meters to the west of the tomb of Rameses IX, KV6. Although it's very corroded, nowadays it is one of the most famous tombs in the Valley of the Kings. The tomb was evidently looted and damaged in ancient times, but it still contained treasures which overwhelmed the researchers who found it. The list of findings is impressive. According to Nicholas Reeves and Richard H. Wilkinson, it contained a shrine and shrine fittings, wood, gilded and bronze, pile rosettes, gold bronze, beer fragments, gold, coffin and coffin fittings, urias from the statue socler, wood, bez figures, earring fasteners, a vulture collar, gold, a floral collar, gold, inlaid, necklace ornaments, plaques, amulets, beads, foil fragments, canopic jars, calcite, the silver head of a goose, boxes and furniture fragments, a wood hieratic label, tools and fragments of tools, bricks, knives, boomerangs, grapes, papyrus rolls, boxes, pebbles and some small ritual items, and an ostracon with a plan. Some of these items belong to Akhenaten's second wife, Kia, known as the Great Beloved Wife, to his father Amenhotep III, or to his mother Tiye. One of the clay seals contains the name of his son, Tutankhamun. The most important discovery of all was the skeleton of a very badly mummified man. After years of debate, most researchers agree that the remains belong to the pharaoh Akhenaten. According to DNA tests, the man discovered in KV55 was the father of Tutankhamun. The body lay in the coffin under a representation of a pharaoh without a face, suggesting the priests punished Akhenaten. In the ancient Egyptian belief system, a person whose portraits and inscriptions of their name were destroyed lived an eternal life without knowing their identity. The Eternal House of Amarna. The tomb associated with Akhenaten that was located in his city was discovered by locals around 1887. The tomb was badly destroyed after the death of the king, and some of the reliefs were damaged, but many others survived. One of the chambers was perhaps dedicated to his mother, Queen Tiye, another to his daughter Akhetaten. The funerary equipment discovered inside the tomb was very fragmentary. The researchers also found some bones which have not been unidentified. They perhaps belonged to a human. The decoration of the tomb was destroyed after Akhenaten's death. However, some of the most famous depictions of the royal family survived. The best known is the one which shows Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and their 5 daughters within a temple court making offerings to Aton. There is also a depiction of Akhetaten and a nurse showing a royal infant. All of the reliefs are in the characteristic style of Akhenaten's times. History still can say that Akhenaten is still a very mysterious person. There are still many gaps in his biography. There is no definitive record of his death. His tomb in the Valley of the Kings was never completed. His successors, including Tutankhamun, his own son, restored the old gods. Akhenaten's name was chiseled out from monuments. His mummified face was destroyed. His memory was systematically erased. Why such extreme measures? Was it a reaction to his heresy, or an attempt to hide something the world was not ready to know? Even his DNA results, tested in modern times, show anomalies. When compared with his supposed relatives, strange mutations and elongated skull traits sparked a flurry of conspiracy theories. The alien connection. Now let's go deeper. Some theorists believe Akhenaten was not human, but a hybrid being sent by extraterrestrials to change Earth's spiritual path. Take a look at his depictions. His skull shape matches what we'd call grey alien proportions. His sudden religious revolution mimics what ancient alien theorists describe as intervention. His city? Possibly a contact zone. Still doubt it. Let's look at the shocking event happened at the beginning of the 20th century that will definitely make you rethink everything. In 1925, Dr. Julio C. Tello found in Peru, near the town of Pisco, a cemetery that contained unusual dead. In all, about 420 mummified bodies were found wrapped in embroidered textiles. Several of the dead bodies had elongated skulls. Initial analysis revealed that these skulls belonged to the mysterious Paracas people. Virtually nothing is known about this culture, except what can be gleaned from the study of their mummies. From this we understand that they were extremely skilled in weaving and coloring textiles. They knew the techniques of skull drilling, perhaps also possessed some knowledge of making the environment aseptic for operations, and were skilled with pottery. The question on everyone's mind is, how come these skulls had the elongated shape? The simplest answer is that, as soon as they were born, babies were placed very tight bandages around the skull. As time went on, these bandages would make the skull narrower and narrower, eventually creating a conical shape. This seemed the most logical and sensible answer. But, as we shall see, this is probably not the only answer. Researchers have found that some of these skulls have a total volume of about 1.5 liters, which is about 25% more than a normal skull. Also, a higher weight than a normal skull. Why this is important? This finding clashes with the idea that elongated skulls are all the result of bandages put on the skulls of newborn babies. In fact, the bandage on a baby's head can change the shape of the skull to some extent, but it cannot change either volume or weight. These aspects are determined by DNA and not by bandages. This means that if it is true that the skulls called chongos are indeed bulkier and heavier than normal, the owners of these skulls had different DNA from ours. Were these humans carriers of a genetic disease? Or, if they were healthy, were they healthy human beings with DNA different from ours? The shocking comparison led us to the Pharaoh's family. This alteration in the volume of the skull, which is significantly greater than the volume of a normal human, is also present in the sculptures of Pharaoh Akhenaten's family. Studying those statues, one realizes that the skull of the model being portrayed was not simply elongated, as if it had been altered by the bands applied to the skull. The total volume of those skulls is much greater than that of a normal skull, as in the case of Chongos skulls. Akhenaten may have been part of a global phenomenon. Even Sigmund Freud wrote in his book Moses and Monotheism that Moses was based on Akhenaten, suggesting the origin of monotheism traces back to this pharaoh. In his book Moses and Monotheism, he shocked many of its readers because of his suggestion that Moses was actually born into an Egyptian household, rather than being born as a Hebrew slave and merely raised in the Egyptian royal household as a ward, as recounted in the book of Exodus. Freud proposed that Moses had been a priest of Akhenaten who fled Egypt after the pharaoh's death and perpetuated monotheism through a different religion, and that he was murdered by his followers, who then via reaction formation revered him and became irrevocably committed to the monotheistic idea he represented. What happened to the Akhenaten's legacy? After his disappearance, Egypt rewrote history. His city was abandoned, his name lost, his family broken, his son Tutankhamun died young, and even his tomb contains strange, otherworldly items like iron from meteorites. But fragments of Akhenaten's sun cult survived, possibly influencing later religions, from Judaism to Christianity. And modern archaeologists keep finding clues: alien-like depictions, enigmatic texts, solar alignments that defy ancient building methods. Was Akhenaten merely a revolutionary ruler, or was he the messenger of something not from this world? It's up to you to decide. Akhenaten remains a mystery wrapped in sunbeams and sand, a pharaoh who rejected the gods of earth to follow a god of light in the sky. Was he insane, a genius, or something otherworldly? Tell us in the comments what you believe. Was Akhenaten a heretic or an alien king? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more shocking deep dives into the secrets of history. The truth may have been hidden in plain sight, burning in the sky since the dawn of civilization.